Good day, and welcome to Nurture for the Soul. I am Reverend Dr. Aaron Wade, your host for today's webinar. I serve as the Minister for Congregational Leadership Development, Granting, and Scholarships on the Faith Education, Innovation, and Formation team, often referred to as Faith Info. We are a part of the Justice and Local Church Ministries within the national setting of the United Church of Christ. Nurture for the Soul is a weekly webinar offering sharing practical, educational, and innovative informational resources while engaging critical topics for local churches and people of faith. Produced by the Justice and Local Church Ministries of the United Church of Christ, we have faithfully focused on care and education for the people of God. From cultural and community organizing to congregational leadership, from worship and theology to resourcing small and rural churches, from ministry with youth and children to wide-ranging justice issues, featuring guest artists, authors, and key leaders, Nurture the Soul stays current to how the gospel is alive in this time. This is a space for connection, community, and nurture. Together, we can bring our church, our communities, and the world towards the world God imagines for all of us. Join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time for Nurture for the Soul, and look for special offerings from time to time as well. We are always producing opportunities to engage, and you can find a full list of upcoming digital programming offerings at ucc.org/events or any of our social media platforms. Friends, if these conversations move you, if what's offered here helps to enhance your ministry or your soul, I'm going to invite you to consider making a donation towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Once again, you can do this by simply texting the letters UCC to 41444. Your prayerful and financial support helps programs like this in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. Thank you, and thank you in advance. Now, today, we are on the second episode of our four-part series on revitalizing church practices. And so far, we have explored new church planting strategies where we looked at how to successfully plant churches in creative new ways. We did that last week. Today, we're going to look at multiple streams of income through utilizing 501c3s separately from your church. And over the next weeks, we will dive into grant exploration. We're going to look at navigating the waters of pursuing grants by using the grants that we offer through my office as a template for how to write the application for the grants and be able to go after those. And then the following week, we're going to look at effective grant making, where we're going to have some panelists look at how do you create grant opportunities for those who are in the philanthropy industry looking to make grants, churches that may have endowments and they want to make funds available to folk. We're going to help you identify key strategies for making effective grant making. Each episode will feature a panel of seasoned experts ready to share their wisdom and experience. Joining us today in our discussion, we have with us Reverend Dr. Kenneth Samuel. He's the founding pastor of Victory for the World Church that has used a 501c3 Victory Outreach and Community Empowerment to help build a community center that fully serves the community with programming, sports, feeding programs, housing programs, voters registration, and a host of other things. He is also an author and he's served as an elected official. Additionally, we have Carla Leon coming to us from Canada, UCC Canada. She's the president and chief executive officer of Just Like Family Home Care. She spearheaded the first social acquisition by charities in Canada. She strives to make social impact, transforming home care across Canada for franchise owners and the families they serve. We also have with us Pastor Curt Thomas. Curt Thomas is the founder and senior pastor of the Renewed Church of Los Angeles and the director and manager of Momma's House Incorporated, which is a housing program geared to reaching the homeless and disenfranchised. And last but certainly not least, we have with us Bishop Yvette Flunder, founder and pastor of City of Refuge UCC. She's the presiding bishop of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and founder and executive of Ark of Refuge Incorporated, a nonprofit agency which provides housing, direct services, education and training for persons affected by HIV/AIDS in the Bay Area, throughout the USA, and in 3 countries in Africa. I want to welcome and thank each of you for giving of your time in today's webinar. Let's jump right into this. I did a brief intro of each of you, but I'm sure the audience would love to hear from you around who you are and your connections, in particular to doing work with nonprofit organizations, expanding the work of ministry through the use of nonprofit organizations. So I'm going to invite you at this time to turn on your camera and to unmute yourself. In the following order, I'm going to ask that you introduce yourself. We're going to first have Bishop Flunder, followed by Reverend Dr. Kenneth Samuel, followed by Carla Leon, and then Pastor Curt Thomas. Please introduce yourself at this time.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Bishop Yvette Flunder and Reverend Dr. Yvette Flunder, and several other things I suspected. But it is my great joy to be a part of this conversation. I am the 30 plus years now pastor of City of Refuge, United Church of Christ, and also the executive director of the Y. Flunder Foundation. It is not the Ark of Refuge, by the way. It is the Y. Flunder Foundation, and we have 2 other 501c3s also associated with City of Refuge and with TFAM, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. I've learned a great deal over time, and I know we will talk more about the specifics, but with joy. I am a mother and a grandmother and the spouse of Mother Shirley Miller for 40 years almost. Our anniversary will be our 40th anniversary coming up soon. And she's decided to keep me, which I think is just outstanding, I might add. I believe that gives you a beginning. Hello, and God bless each of you that are doing this work. Many things I would love to share today about my journey. God bless you.
Thank you so much there, Bishop, and my apologies about the incorrect usage of the name. We're going to now have Reverend Dr. Kenneth Samuel, please.
With all of you, you and your team, it's good to see some friends who I haven't seen in many years. It's a blessing. Just to look upon your countenance, it really is. It's quite encouraging. So I've been pastoring Victory for the World, United Church of Christ for 36 years. And we've had our 501c3 in place for about 30 years. It's called Victory Outreach in Community Empowerment. That's the acronym, that's the name, but the acronym is VOICE, VOICE, Victory Outreach and Community Empowerment. And we've just done several things that greatly enhanced our community. It really, those programs we sponsored through our 501c3 really helped to put us on the map in Atlanta as a community-focused, a community-based church through the services that we were able to offer. So we can talk more specifically about some of the things that we've done and are still trying to do, but it's a delight to be here with you to not only share information, but receive information, because I'm always looking for ways that we can improve our efforts and have even a greater impact on the people that we serve. I am the proud father of a single daughter, my only begotten, who was married last June. I had the privilege of walking her down the aisle and performing her wedding ceremony. She told me, "Dad, you got to work it out." But in her beloved, and right now I'm lobbying that their first child has Samuel somewhere in the name, because she took the name of her husband, who was a Williams. And so I got him on board already. So I just got to work on her. See if I can get Samuel in there somewhere as they plan their family. But I'm delighted to be here with you all this afternoon. Dr. Wade, always good to be with you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Kenneth. We appreciate you. And hopefully you get that name in there, you know.
I'm trying.
We'll now ask that Carla Leon, if you would please introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And it's wonderful to be here. I am north of the border, so it's already down to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So yikes, let's keep on going. So I was actually the director of innovation with the United Church of Canada for over a decade in this journey. And just having just the joy of seeing how things can be done differently. There were 8 people in a church basement who said, we will do social enterprise. How about home care? Let's buy a franchise. And a church in Victoria, BC bought a franchise 4 years ago. They grew the business quite substantially to such a point that the head office said, well, we could sell this to a church. Imagine a whole, like McDonald's being sold to a church. And so McDonald's, the church came to me and said, could we do this? We raised the money. We're over 50% owned by 3 different charities, including the Church Building and Loan Fund with the United Church of Christ is one of our key investors. And we've continued to just explore this rabbit hole of the impact that can be made. I have 4 stepchildren who just are wondering what their stepmom is up to. So I had to write a book about it that will be out at the end of the year, so they finally know what a social acquisition is, and continuation of my own faith journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Carla. We will now have Pastor Curt D. Thomas to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Curt Thomas. I am the senior pastor of the Renewed Church of Los Angeles, where we'll be celebrating 13 years. I guess I'm the new kid on the block, or the young boy on the block, and so we'll be celebrating 13 years of ministry this month, and so I'm excited about that. My journey is that we started a housing service with our church, and we have a 22-bed, 6-bath program in Los Angeles, and we've recently expanded to where we have 5. We support 5 houses and a community center in Riverside, which is the Inland Empire area. We are part of a project called Project Legacy that received $20 million from Governor Newsom to be innovative and to do the work that we do here in Los Angeles. And so I'm super excited about that. So we're able to help over 200 people, specifically as it relates to people that are HIV positive and our LGBTQ trans community. And so I'm super excited about that as well. I do have a husband. We've been married for, we just celebrated 4 years of marriage. And so his name is Matthew. Love Matthew. We've been together for 6 years. And he's an awesome singer, and he's releasing an album pretty soon. And so if I don't plug that, I'm sure that he'll be mad at me. And I want to be married as long as Bishop Flunder, and I want him to keep me as well. And so I really appreciate being a part of the conversation with these amazing people. I'm in awe, like I'm at the Hollywood Awards, because I'm just in awe of all of the people that are on this panel. And so I'm super excited about the conversation. And thank you, Dr. Wade, for including me in this moment.
Definitely, Pastor Curt. We would be remiss not to have you and all of you as panelists in today's conversation. You are a group of heavy hitters who have been doing great work. And so we want to glean as a community from your wisdom, from the lived experience that you've had in setting up 501c3s. How do we get to this conversation? Today's conversation is really a result of many conversations that I've had with church leaders trying to identify creative ways to carry out missional work, what God has called this church, what God has called and gave us a vision to the pastor, carrying out missional work and operations, because, you know, to maintain a church, there are operations and operational expenses that come along with it, all while trying to figure out how to generate funds. to support these necessary works of the church. I've heard from many pastors and many church leaders who've said, tithes and offering and pledges are models. And yes, we thank God for those who are giving gifts, abundantly, and who are giving gifts, honestly from their heart, so that we can maintain the work of the church. And so we're thankful for that. But many pastors have had big visions and wanted to open up and do great things, but just the finances haven't been there. They were limited. And so I've had conversations with folk around exploring, have you started a separate 501c3? And so this conversation today comes out of that. And so I wanted to gather a couple of my friends, a couple of folk that I look up to, mentors, mothers, to just really help us in looking at how do we utilize a 501c3 to bring in multiple streams of revenue for doing the missional work that God has called us to. One way, so now as we prepare to have this dialogue, I must say, before any of our viewers plan to implement anything discussed here in this discussion, this is that let me give the disclaimer. Before you implement anything that we talk about, it's imperative that you discuss and consult with your legal counsel or tax experts at the beginning of your planning, and to build a group of consultants that you can work with and think through budgeting, feasibility budgeting, before you take on these initiatives. I want to make sure that if something catches your attention, that you also look to counsel to get support and suggestions on how to start and what's your particular context, how it can land and roll out in your particular context. So let's start off with this question. What does it mean to generate multiple streams of revenue through a 501c3? And how can this strategy benefit churches and communities? I'm posing that question to anyone on the panel. What does it mean to generate multiple streams of revenue through a 501c3? And how can this benefit our churches and our communities? Would anyone like to take a stab at that? From your perspective, what does it mean?
I don't mind being first.
Mm-hmm.
I see all those kind of you go first looks on the face. So let me say it this way. Well, let me share my experience. My experience is, first of all, being a woman clergy, being a person of African descent, being a person who emerged from serious Pentecostal background, and also a same-gender loving person during the age of HIV, when it was really killing people, 2 or 3 folks every week. In those times, there was a huge need to respond to the epidemic. And simultaneously, we felt called by God to establish a church in San Francisco, sort of in the belly of the beast, but also needing to reach out in real ways as a church for the funding that it took. This was all the way back when AIDS had several other names. That's how far back, grid, if you understand what I'm saying, how far back we go. There were certain aha moments in that time. And the aha moments were first of all, we were not going to get money from basically any faith-based organization. We realized that. We were not going to, we were predominantly African-American, woman-led, and radically inclusive of same-gender loving people and trans people. So we had to come up with some kind of way to make money in order to serve the communities that we were called to. And we began then developing 2 organizations. One, of course, was City of Refuge, Community Church, Inc., which is a California nonprofit. And the other was the Ark of Refuge, which was our first 501c3. All of our other than the church 501c3s now have molded into the Yvette Flunder Foundation. And we realized we had to reach out in some way to find money. We realized because, again, we didn't fit into the conservative places. And during that time, even the denominational realities, we're not going to be looking at folks that were that much outside of the circle of acceptable places to put our funds. But we did find people who would fund us. And we learned that some of that could come from faith-based organizations, but we also had to give a real serious footprint with organizations, in organizations that were not faith-based. A lot of the folks who funded us because we were not real churchy looking. They wanted to help us do community work during HIV and during times that people were in huge need. And we were in our first clinic downstairs in the kitchen area with people who were starting to use medications that were still being determined whether or not they were going to be the medications. We had folks on tables holding up bags with medication on coat hangers, starting the work when we started. And looking for funding had to come from sort of rebel funding sources that were going to bypass what religion was doing and what religion was saying, bypass people who had issues with people of color, bypass people who had issues with the LGBTQI community. And we found those funders. Many of them were individuals who were very well heeled and doing great work in all of the areas that I lifted up, but had never done anything with a church. We never suggested to them that we weren't a church. We laid down in coffins on the freeway just like they did, and did the work that needed to be done just like they did. And we began to close the gap between religion being an enemy and religion being an asset in doing the work of HIV and AIDS. And that's where it began. And we learned and began to reach out to all of the TFAM churches and those that are affiliated with us. This is before we came to the United Church of Christ. That what we had to do was to treat our walls like they are glass and not mortar, where we could see fully into the world, but the world could see fully into City of Refuge. The end result was a growth of City of Refuge and its launch of TFAM and planting churches all over the country and world with an idea toward continuing what it is that we're talking about. Let's do something about these walls between us and the people that we serve, theologically, in terms of embracing common ideas, the church not being a poison to those who want to fund, but also the funders not making us go outside of what we really feel we are called to do and be. And that's sort of the beginning of our history. There's much more that I could say about that, but hallelujah. That's the way, that is really the way it began.
Thank you there, Bishop, for helping us literally unpack what it means to look at multiple streams of income, multiple streams of revenue by using a separate 501c3. And I just want to take a pause here. You said something that was really, really powerful. In this conversation, we're talking about utilizing a separate 501c3 from the church's 501c3 for a reason. So often folk, funders, foundations, corporations, government agencies, they will do work with religious entities, but so many folk have skepticism around working with religious spaces. And so having a separate 501c3 that can align with the missional work of the church takes away that initial or potential initial bad taste, or the I don't want to work with a church or a religious entity, because you have this separate entity that's saying this is what we set out to do missionally, and from a vision perspective, we're looking to do this work. That's what we're focused on. We're not trying to convert anyone, trying to get anyone to come and do. We want to get folk the services that we're looking to offer, that God, we believe the divine has called us to help with. Thank you.
I know I don't want to overdo, but just one little piece.
Go ahead, Bishop.
You can take your board. You can have one board, and you can have a meeting for the church and then close that meeting. and then open another one.
I remember a conversation we had, but I won't go into the conversation.
I'm still very serious about that. And sometimes it's different set of bylaws and whatever, but the heart of it can still be the same. If you understand what I'm saying, to reach the community, to reach the community, to reach the community. That's the heart of it. Thank you.
No, thank you, Bishop. We're going to get into that and look at some strategies. Go ahead.
Add something to what Bishop has said. She laid it out there. What we did very intentionally at the beginning, and I know that's one way to do it, Bishop, to just close one meeting when open another one. We've had to do that sometimes, but I tried to be very intentional about getting people from the community, non-members of the church, to serve as the board of our voice, Victory Outreach Community Evangelism, because I wanted our Victory Outreach and community empowerment to reflect the community. And Victory is a part of the community. So I really tried to reach out, find partners in the community that would share our mission of service, as you say, not necessarily to evangelize, even though if you're doing the work of Christ, people are going to get the good news. You don't even have to say much about it, but you speak through your work. You speak through the service that you give to people. You speak through how you impact and improve people's lives. And so that's what we tried to do. The only rub with that is that, and I'm just saying this because very recently we got a grant from the Interdenominational Theological Center because STI rates have risen rather exponentially since COVID in the Atlanta area. And so the state is seeing the need, and communities are seeing the need to readdress the whole issues of STI now. And of course, including HIV, but really STIs across the board. And so they provided ITC, which is the Black Theology School.
Interdenominational Theological Seminary.
Theological Center, right. They're not going to be offering master's degrees soon, but there's still an entity there. But the only issue, and it doesn't have to be a problem, but it can be problematic. At least it was a problem for me just recently, though, because we got a partner from the community. He came well recommended. He had lots of experience in working with what we call Aid Atlanta and several other groups that do work in really health awareness, and particularly in the area of sexually transmitted infections. And he just expected a consultant fee that was not made clear in the writing of the grant. So needless to say, we had a little friction. We had a little meeting last night with the board, of which he is a part as a community partner. And, he put in a lot of work, on the grant, which we did get accepted for. It was on a small grant, about $10,000, but still, to do some workshops and to do some community awareness, to provide some testing in our area on STIs and all of that. And he just expected a consultant fee, but it was not clearly written in the grant. So I had to make it clear to him that we were not going to violate the terms of the grant, even though he put in a lot of work. And I had to encourage him that there's nothing wrong with consultants, but you just have to know how they're going to be paid. And he was trying to take money away from the staff and put it in consultant. And the board and me personally, we just weren't with that. So he ended up walking, which means now, thankfully, we have other partners who can come in and pick up the reins. But I think partnering with community people and organizations, I think, is very important. They just need to be clear about fiscal operations, and particularly how your board intends to disperse funds. Now, this was a small grant, but we've had grants up to, much larger. And when it comes to that amount of money, people get a little antsy about, where's my share, where's my cut? And not that they're not doing the work, but it just has to be reflected in how funds are dispersed. So that's something I just caution people to be very clear about, to make it upfront, because we actually lost a partner because he was not clear about our intent on how to disperse funds. for his services.
Thank you for that. So a little later in our conversation, we're going to look at how some of the challenges that may face with setting up their 501c3. And I think you're doing a good job already with helping us to identify some of the things to be mindful of if you're going to set up a separate 501c3 and look at some of the things that you might encounter and that you want to be aware of. So I think that's good. I want to direct this question to Pastor Curt, and I'm coming to you right after this, Carla. The question is, Pastor Curt, Momma's House Incorporated has made significant strides in helping the homeless and disenfranchised. How did the integration of the 501c3 model make a difference in the inception and in the operation of the housing program? Can you share that with a little bit with us about that?
Yes. So for us, one of the things that it immediately does is it creates job stability for possibly for some of the people that are in your congregation. And so now you're able to hire people to actually work and to actually fulfill the needs past just coming to church on Sunday and volunteering, in the actual church. And so financial stability is one of those big things that not just for the church, but you have to look at how can you create financial stability for the people that are in your congregation. Because if you have a thriving congregation and those people are educated with their money and you're able to not only house some of them, but you're able to employ some of them, then it creates great financial stability. The second thing that it does is it creates resource expansion. And so you're able to expand your resources. I heard Dr. Flunder and Dr. Samuels talk about them being able to go out and do work that surpassed the pulpit. And so that's one of the things that it does for us, because now you're able to do what we call bridge build, and we're able to bring in mental health specialists that after we lay hands on you and pour oil on you, we can send you there to deal with those mental demons. It also creates education around STIs, and which Dr. Samuels talked about that. It also creates a space and an opportunity for you to continue to be able to bring in community leaders, so that it is not just about spirituality. It's just not about religion, but it becomes a complete foundational infrastructure that helps to not only build community, but helps to build your church.
So what I hear you saying is that having this 501c3 gave your church the opportunity to provide larger reach, and also to the community, it also provided wraparound services. So you can come and have the religious experience and be able to worship and to be able to share. But then there's also the practical of the day-to-day, that at the end of the day, if there's mental health services, if there's housing needs, food crisis, you can actually put hands to feet and be able to do it. And it provided you that opportunity. Is that what I understood clearly?
Exactly. All the way around, because like I said, a lot of times we only focus on the people's needs that are outside of the church, but sometimes there are people that have needs that are inside the church. Sometimes they're praying that God will bless them with a job, and when you get a grant or you get the capacity to be able to do that, now you're able to hire qualified people that are in your church. That creates the reciprocity that's needed in order for you to function the way that you need to function. And so for us, that's what it actually has done. And we've been able to work successfully with local CBOs, community-based organizations here in the city to accomplish that and to be able to do things that are necessary outside of the pulpit.
Wow, thank you for that. Carla, being at the forefront of transforming Just Like Family Home Care into a social enterprise, how can faith organizations adapt this model to benefit their communities while ensuring the financial sustainability of their operations as well?
Yeah, so I think I would just say that everyone's story is what the key that I've heard is that this is the tip of the rabbit hole. You're at the edge of it. And so you don't know what you don't know
Wow, thank you for that. So I know the tax code and the tax law is different, and I'm not a tax expert, just disclaimer to say here that at the end of the day, I know that it's different in Canada and it's different here. I've seen, and I know of churches who have started senior housings through their 501c3 arm. I know that we're speaking specifically through acquisition with what you're saying, Carla, but I have seen where churches, DC and it's Chicago, New York, where pastors have actually worked with the city to create senior housing, got grant money to be able to do it. And it was through the 501c3 arm also. So that's two different approaches for how one could go about being able to do it. And I think both models are good. And I invited Carla to this conversation because I think this is another arm of it, that there is also business models that come from the for-profit sector, and you can delve into the for-profit sector to be able to do some of it. So thank you there, Carla. I remember when I was pastoring, I retired last year, 13 years of pastoring. One of the things that we did in the first 2 years, we had a strategic planning meeting, and we realized tithes and offerings for us was not helping us to scale, get to the place of 30 years of vision that we had set out. And I brought Bishop Flunder and asked Bishop Flunder to just walk with us and talk with us a little bit about how we could carry out this big 30-year plan that we had put together, strategic plan. And in that conversation, Bishop Flunder brought up something that really capsulized, it really crystallized what I was trying to do. This concept of this wagon wheel that she talked about, this old rugged wagon wheel is what I envisioned, and how at the center of this wheel is where, it connects to the wagon, but then all these spokes are coming out of the wagon in different directions. And she was sharing with us, you want to share a little bit about that, Bishop, how the center is the church, but all the spokes that's coming out are the various efforts of mission?
Yeah, this is something I teach a lot in the seminaries, because people who love people and people who love God and people who have a heart for the people who are most disenfranchised often don't have a whole lot of money. Can I just put that out there? I would say that conservative money is very different than the money that a lot of us who are justice people are involved in. It seems that people really do fund hatred and really do fund racism and homophobia and anti-women, and just it's amazing to me how that works. So it means that we do have to be creative. And one of the things that Dr. Wade is speaking to is a way in which we established ministry at City of Refuge, and it's gone out from City of Refuge to the TFAM family and some other folks who are part of our work, and we're teaching it in the seminaries as well. The top down, the triangular reality where there's leadership here, and then there's another level, another level, another level, another level. I think that its time has come and gone. I am a part of a pastor's table, a shepherd's table at City of Refuge. I have my roles and responsibilities. And every person who is a spoke on that wheel is a shepherd of a sort, a pastor who has responsibilities. All of them are educated as it relates to theology, informed as it relates to theology. And they also have something else that they do. They're the counselors, they are grant writers, they are educators, everybody's got something else that they do. None of us are the full-time pastor. The whole table is the full-time pastor. Maybe that's the best way to say it. But each of those spokes has both a responsibility, pastoral responsibility to the church, and a pastoral responsibility to our community in a very real and tangible way. What it does is it changes the dynamic from we are the church and you got to come to us and you got to do what we say and you got to sing on key and you got to run up and down the aisle or whatever it is that we do. You got to remember the folks, all the folks that died, and I'll know all their names and you know the history. It's amazing what can happen in the church to make you really be a part of it when it is a top-down reality. So we want to move away from the top-down, move to a table of people who have leadership and pastoral and or faith-based connections simultaneously. And each of those realities where they lead is something that serves our community. Our food service alone, we had an incredible grant that was a very, very close, well, about $1.5 million. And the whole responsibility was to provide food. And imagine, that was an incredible opportunity to provide food. But every other week, we provide food. It's amazing. The people come through, they drive their cars. You would think we were giving away, $25 at a time, but they're coming to get these bags and bags and bags. And because homelessness in California and housing insecurity is incredible, $87,000 a year is considered a low-income salary in California. $87,000 is low to moderate income in California. If you don't make that much money, you just can hardly survive. That's why so many people are without housing and housing insecure. So we feed them. We make sure that they have food. And then in that process, there are several other things: mental and emotional help and support, help as it relates to their children and youth, help as it relates to connecting them. We don't do everything, but we have a huge community of people that we can connect people to. So the idea of how do we pastor in the inner city, which is the belly of the beast in so many ways for so many of us. All of us had to be prepared. All of us had to have theological education, but all of us also have something other that we also specialize in and connect to and can bring to that table. I believe that all faith-based organizations and churches ought to move toward a wagon wheel and start encouraging people to be a part of the ministry with the things that they do on a day-to-day basis to serve people. Bring it to the ministry in some way and serve outside of that. Don't leave that part, you know what I mean, at home, and just bring your shouting and singing self to the ministry. Bring the services. If that can kind of answer your question, that's what comes up.
Yeah,
and
no.
There's one other thing.
Go ahead.
Conservatives spend money for what they really want to do. I want to say it again. They spend buku grand theft dough. Can I say it that way?
The views expressed on this show.
Buku. Call me if you all don't get that. Call me and I'll break it down for you. But buku grand theft dough for hatred, racism. Just look at our atmosphere. I would encourage us also to think of what it is that we can do to change that dynamic. What do we care enough about as the people of God and people of justice and righteousness? What do we care enough about that we would really invest it in both our time and our treasure to make sure that people's needs are being taken care of and cared for? So that's the rest of it. That's a big part of what we talk about in this table. What can you do? What can you bring? Then we go outside of that and start looking for funders and folks that will help us, not force us to compromise what we believe, but join us as we serve people. I hope that kind of brings some.
That was exceptional, Bishop. Like the piece that stuck with me always was the funding that is attached to each of those things that folk, they're bringing their gifts, but they also go and look for funding through the nonprofit to really be able to fuel and be able to bring in resources. Thank you for that. So we have some time, and we got to get some practical questions in here for folk who are like trying to figure out where they start. And so what I would like to start off with is this first question is, how does a small church or medium-sized church, how do they balance its spiritual commitments with the practicality and demands of running a 501c3? Because it's a separate entity and it takes work. So anyone with your experience, can you give us an answer there? How does a church in particular, but I want to really speak to our small, our rural, our medium-sized churches, the churches that may not have a lot of resources already, person resources. How do they manage between the practical demands of doing church and building a 501c3 if they decide to take this on as a separate entity? Anyone would like to share there?
I'll start as and say that for us, when we first started, as I said, we didn't have all of the resources in place, to make everything happen. And so I think that if you are a small church, that one of the basic things that you can do is find community partners, find people that you can partner with in the community, because they can offer a service that you don't have to reinvent the wheel for. They can provide something for you and to you that that you don't have to basically add. It's not an add-on. It's just a bridge. And then with that, most of the time, once you get connected to people that are in community, that's where you'll gain more resources. And so now you're not only producing community involvement. Now you're not only producing resources, but now you're developing relationships, and those relationships will cause people to come to your church. Those relationships will cause people to get more involved in all of the active things that you have going on. And then your church will grow as well as a result of that, because people want to be connected to something that is an organism that is perpetually growing. And so that is what I would do. I would start small. I think a lot of times we try to be big when little has us. And we try to create these grandeur moments because we want to be like everybody else, and we want to make sure that we present it the way that that the big church presents it. But I think that people, if you know, viral on TikTok are and all of these entities, not over something that was perfectly planned, but it was something that just happened.
I do want to jump in because my model is so different and it's a for-profit. What's really interesting about it is that it is a separate entity from the church completely. It's actually an investment. So the communities of faith who are actually invested in a franchise or in a business that's arm's length, they actually have a full separate board, but the board is typically going to be business people. So people who can make and move at the pace of business. And it's actually illegal to volunteer for a for-profit business. So you have to employ people. You actually have paid salaried staff. So it's actually not volunteers. You should be treating it almost like you would treat your investment in a mutual fund, right? So when we actually raise the money, the biggest thing for people to wrap their head around, they're like, compared us to a program. Like, no, compare us to your stocks and bonds, right? So even thinking it's just that one step even further.
I'll add to that and say that one of our first grants had to do with providing customer service training, because in our community, Black community, people were complaining, why do I have to drive way over to the white neighborhood to get to go to a decent restaurant or to have my clothes cleaned at a decent, So I said, well, maybe we should look at some kind of customer service training, because I've always believed that, I don't know how it is elsewhere, but Chick-fil-A has a model. Now they're very conservative, but they have a model for service that people appreciate. And even those of us who were boycotting Chick-fil-A for many years because of their homophobic stances have to take our hats off and tip them, because when it comes to customers, at least here in Atlanta, Georgia, if you want, but they're about the best that it comes in terms of fast food. All you're gonna get is their chicken breast, but you're gonna get it professionally. They're not gonna argue with you if you need ketchup. If your French fries are cold, they're gonna. Customer service. So that was one of our first grants. I think we got about $50,000 to provide customer service training for local businesses in our community. They bought in, they set their people. We employed people to train them. And it did help to improve businesses in our community that we felt were not offering the level of professionalism that people expected. And there were a number of reasons for that, by the way. But I think for small, and we were very small, just starting, but it all began with doing surveys, nothing formal, just asking people in the congregation as well as the community, what kind of things do you think would improve this community? And then from there, I started having conversations with our county commissioner or your local elected official, not the U.S. senator people, but the people who are responsible for the local districts and community. In our case, it's our commissioners. So I called the commissioner, and the commissioner said, I want to support you. We were just a small church. Nobody knew who we were, but I said, we're trying to do this. Commissioner said, we want to help you. And so they sent resources. They helped us get the word out. They provided advertisement throughout the community, and it really worked. So those are things that it doesn't take a lot of money to have conversations with people, to identify a need or several needs in the community and say, we are working to address this need. We need partners. And we were quite surprised. I mean, we got the NAACP, the local NAACP supporting us. And it really was a good model for how the church could partner. And that was one of our first grants that we launched. So I would say, have the conversations. You know, there are a lot of needs. You got to prioritize and pinpoint which one you want to address. But there are resources. And the main impetus is that people are saying, we want this, we need this. And as we say, so often, you know, vision precedes material, right? You got to have the vision first. You got to have people articulating what the need is first. And then things fell in place, and the money, you know, I can't even remember the name of the entity that funded it, but we had several partners to buy in. And that's one of the things small churches can do. Have the conversation, prioritize the need, and begin to put together strategies that address what people are saying they want and need.
Can I add one thing?
Go ahead, Bishop. Thank you.
Because Bishop, in all of his ways, he's, you know, I love this man, Ken Salmon.
It's mutual. It's mutual.
I love it. People, funders fund people. I think it's important for me to say that, and I think all of us would say that now. I have written grants, or my staff, my people, my folks have written grants, and we didn't paginate. We didn't have time. You know, we just broke our necks trying to get it in on time, and run it down to the place and get it done. And they funded it anyway, if you understand what I'm saying, because relationships matter. Relationships matter. And if those folks that are listening to us really, something I would really love to seed into you at this point and say, what it is that you just heard from Dr. Kenneth Samuel is so very important. Work on your relationships, do your politicking, do what needs to be done, show up at the places, talk to people, because people make decisions, and it's people that fund in so many ways what it is that they believe in you, they believe in you, they believe in you. I think the other thing that he said that I also want to reinforce, know your niche. You can't do everything. You find your niche, know your niche, and then partner with somebody else that can niche something else. You know, I think it becomes problematic if we're too many things. We started out with HIV, doing that work, HIV and housing. That was what we did, and that's what we did. HIV and housing. And so when it came time for monkeypox, and it came time for COVID, and it came time for, because we had so much experience with HIV, the people who were looking for people to do that work came looking for us. We didn't go looking for them. They came looking for us because we have that history. We have been feeding people for many, many, many years. Housing people for many, many, many years. The end result is when they start thinking of who should we use for this, it will often be the people that have a history. Find your niche. And you find your niche, do a really good job with that, and then add your niche to my niche and us niche to the other niche. And before we know it, we will really have served the people in our community comprehensively.
Very good.
That's a huge, huge need. And just one more for the old lady on the that would be me. We will not get rich doing this. And I want to say that to everybody who thinks that you have money because you have a grant. I cannot tell you how many people I know that got a grant and went and bought a car and took a trip and thought, because they thought that if you have $100,000, it's going to cost you $125,000 to do the work. because everything that you need to do the work is not going to be in the grant. And there are things that the grant will not pay for. You will have to pay for your own accountant work. You have to pay for your own staffing plans. You got to pay for your own. So everything you get costs money. Okay. Every grant you get costs money, and you do not have money. I want to say to everybody who's listening, if you think that you can take that money and go to France, I want to try to tell you what I tell a whole lot of folks. These folks are going to come for your house and your car and everything else. Mean, if you're doing it, understand there's a cost to pay. And it's going to take a lot of volunteerism. It's going to take money to get money.
Yeah.
To do what time, to get time, to do the work. So, all right, I'm off that.
Thank you, Bishop.
God bless.
We are at a cutting point on our time. There is a question that was posed to Pastor Curt in the group, and it looks like Pastor Curt, you responded back. Thank you so much to that person. They're trying to find some resources in LA around drop-in services. We have 2 questions in our chat. I'm going to see if we can have one of them. I'm going to go to first, and I'm going to say the question is from Andrew Courtney. It says, can someone speak to the process of finding grants to match the mission? I'm going to invite you to come to next week's session, because we'll touch on that a little bit during our next week conversation. We'll have more time to deal with that there. The question that I'm going to propose, and then we're going to close out, is this is from Jeff Spencer. I get setting up a 501c3 to be a vehicle of carrying out missional work by being a non-religious nonprofit to receive grants. But can that 501c3 give money to the congregation to underwrite the overt religious ministry like worship of the congregation? Do anyone want to take a stab at that? I'm seeing Bishop saying, I'm seeing Dr. Samuel shaking his head. No, I'm seeing Bishop shaking their head. No. Okay. No. So the answer is you want to be very careful in cross-pollinating. You want to cross-contaminate, there's a crossword that I can't think of right now. You want to be careful of mixing resources like that. I have seen people creatively hire folk from their congregation, which obviously, if you are a tithing model church, then that brings revenue that way to the church. I've seen where nonprofits donated material that they no longer need to another nonprofit entity, which is normally in the dissolution clause of your bylaws, where folk have given a keyboard or a drum set to help offset the cost of that because they no longer needed it. But when it comes to money, you want to be careful of commingling. That's the word I was looking for. You want to be careful of commingling dollars, because that unless there's programmatic things that's working together or common hired staff that's doing the work over here, but it's got to be very clear on this is specifically for this entity or this particular grant. So just want to admonish you to be mindful of that. There are partnership opportunities, but commingling is a big no when it comes to this, and folk can definitely get in trouble. Thank you, Rob Edwards, for giving me the word. I see it there in commingling. So look, y'all, this is all the time, unfortunately, we have for today. This was a very full conversation, and we want to continue on, but this is all the time we have for today. I hope that the discussion has provided you some useful information around strategies for effectively using a 501c3 to be able to have impact. Remember that this is a 4-part series, and I'm inviting you to join us next week in our discussion on navigating the waters of pursuing grants. In particular, we're going to look at our UCC grant offerings that I provide oversight of. We're going to look at the Neighbors in Need grant, the CASA New and Rebirthing Church grant, the Operational Support grant, Pension Board Benefit grant, and the Genesis grant. And what we're going to do is use those grants that we have here and look at some of the similarities that you may find in other grants, like how to apply with application and some of the things that most applications require from individuals who are applying. In closing, I want to say, as always, we are grateful for your presence, each person that joined us today and those who will watch this in the future. And we're definitely thankful for our panel today. Your gifts and your questions are all a part of why we do this. Thank you for being with us today. And all along the way, join us every Thursdays at 3:30 Eastern Time for Nurture the Soul, and look for special offerings from time to time as well. Again, we are always producing opportunities to engage, and you can find a full list of those opportunities at ucc.org. /events or on any of our social media platforms. And if you missed it up front, please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ. You can do that by simply texting UCC to 41444. Your prayerful and financial support helps programs like this in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. I want to say thank you again for all who participated, all who are here. And let me just say a quick closing blessing for us. God, we thank you for the opportunity of the table where we can gather, where we can fellowship, commune, and share wisdom. We thank you for being with us today, and we thank you for this conversation. We hope and pray that something that we said will create impact, will ignite a fire, and allow ministries to flourish in powerful and effective ways in their communities, creating change for your glory. We ask, God, that you continue to bring us together to work to bring about a just world for all. God, we thank you. We bless you, and we ask that you would bless every church that's open in your name. In the name of the one who set the captives free, we do pray. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you were moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.